They keep coming out of the badlands of the world, each one seemingly stranger than the last. Dinosaurs who took every imaginable body part to extravagant extremes. Baffling, dazzling, elegant, ugly, and utterly surprising.
It doesn't look real. The skull is just like something out of a science fiction movie.
They're an example of evolution gone wild.
That neck that keeps on going and keeps on going, that's bizarre.
In the mysterious lost world of the bizarre dinosaurs, who were the strangest of the strange? And how on earth did they get that way? It may be 110 degrees in the shade. Never mind the fact that there is no shade. But wherever the brutal sun beats down on dinosaur territory these days, it's a good time to be a paleontologist. In the 21st century, dozens of new dinosaurs a year are coming to light. They're not just emerging from the American West. Now Argentina, Antarctica, Africa, and especially China are spitting out finds that have scientists scratching their heads. And some of these dinosaurs are so loaded with outlandish appendages, they're revolutionizing what we thought we knew about them. But the dinosaur story doesn't start with the bizarre and the gigantic. 150 million years before the dinosaurs' catastrophic end, creatures like this little standard issue prototype had the run of the place. Coelophysis has a rather banal body shape. It looks pretty much like a big lizard, walks on its hind legs, eats meat, hunts in packs. Other than that, not much to phone home about. But paleontologists think all dinosaurs descended from plain little animals like this guy. So how did they get from little Coelophysis to say this, or this, or this? What strange impulses of evolution could have molded such things? Consider the spectacular weirdness of this behemoth, Spinosaurus. One of the largest killers ever to walk the earth. So huge and fantastic is this predator that he's managed to steal the show, literally, from T-Rex. When it came time to scare the pants off moviegoers for a third time, Jurassic Park scientific advisor Jack Horner knew exactly what he wanted.
I decided that the T-Rex had had enough press and we were going to get rid of him. So I had Stephen put Spinosaurus in Jurassic Park 3. Spinosaurus is, as far as we know, the largest meat-eating dinosaur. The animal was somewhere around 60 feet long, which makes it a lot bigger than a T-Rex, which is around 40 feet long. So that's a pretty cool dinosaur.
Cool and mystifying. Bigger than T-Rex, but with a head that looks like a crocodile's, and stacked, with spines along its back as tall as a man. The spines, up to 6-foot-long extensions of the animal's vertebrae, have been the subject of lively debate. Some think they anchored a massive muscular hump that would have made the enormous dinosaur all the more powerful. Others have suggested that the spine supported a skin-covered sail that could help regulate the animal's temperature by radiating heat or catching the sun's rays. One thing is clear. The spines must have been doing something important, because they would have been a drag, literally.
I think it would have made the animal more clumsy, I mean, quite frankly. It would have made it less agile. It would have made it heavier. It would have made it catch wind in a strong breeze. There's no good advantage to it that you can think of except showing that, hey, I can grow this 5-foot sail, and I'm healthy, and I'm bigger than you. And here I am over here. There I am over there. This is my territory. You're my mate.
Horner agrees that the sail was for showing off. But he thinks Spinosaurus's spine might have made a nicer display in the water, where the creature may have spent most of its time. Why? Because the creature's head bears a remarkable resemblance to that of a crocodile. A really big crocodile.
Its snout is constructed for eating fish, and so it's quite likely that these animals actually were aquatic, and so the only things that were really sticking out that were visual were sticking out of the water were these big fins on their backs. And so, you know, much of their display may have actually been while they were in the water.
From here, the Spinosaurus puzzle gets even more complicated. What's the use of being bigger than T-Rex if you're just going to hang out by a river and fish? Why have jaws powerful enough to shred another dinosaur? Forearms armed with long, curved claws. What's the evolutionary point of all these deadly developments? Especially if you're going to carry a handicap on your back. So far, Spinosaurus is keeping its secrets to itself.
We have never really seen anything quite like it in the dinosaur world or thereafter. I mean, they're an example of evolution gone wild.
Poor T-Rex, taking a backseat to Spinosaurus on the big screen. But let us not forget that when it comes to bizarre killing machines, T-Rex is in a class all of its own. That iconic, oversized head with its 9-inch serrated teeth. And one of the most devastating bite forces the world has ever seen. And then there is that riddle of riddles, those insanely tiny arms.
You might have been able to scratch his belly after he ate. That's about it. Couldn't reach his mouth, couldn't clap. Yeah, couldn't do much of anything.
The T-Rex head versus hand story had a completely logical explanation until now. It goes like this. It has been shown over and over again that when evolution capitalizes on one part of the anatomy, other parts may become useless, redundant, and eventually disappear. With a head that big and powerful and agile, who needs arms?
Why does T-Rex have small arms? Because he didn't need them and was probably losing them.
What appears to have happened in the Tyrannosaur lineage leading up to T-Rex is that the bodies of these animals just kept going, but the arms got left behind. They're also losing fingers. They've gone down to 2 functional fingers.
This answer makes compelling sense at first. And T-Rex was not alone in taking this apparently sensible trade-off in deadly assets. While the tyrant was roaming North America, one of the weirdest-looking large predators ever was rampaging in South America. Called the meat-eating bull for its peculiar horns, Carnotaurus is not pretty. It has a strangely shaped head, tiny teeth, and arms so small they would make even T-Rex giggle. What was it doing with them? The anatomy of Carnotaurus is baffling to see.
Carnotaurus is one weird-looking dinosaur. It's got a very foreshortened skull. It looks like someone's gone up to this dinosaur and smashed it in the face with a frying pan. But one thing that really strikes out, though, is this enormous shoulder blade. It is absolutely vast. At the end of the shoulder blade, you'd expect to see enormous arms, but you don't. They're absolutely tiny. In fact, it makes the arms of Tyrannosaurus Rex look large.
So these great killers, living in the very last age of the dinosaurs, were apparently on the brink of trading in their arms completely for the sake of even more lethal heads. Makes sense, right? But two new discoveries have thrown a monkey wrench into that scenario, and the mystery deepens into debate. First, you'd expect useless arms to be, well, useless. Instead, studies on T-Rex biomechanics show that T-Rex could probably have curled some 400 pounds with those pathetic-looking arms.
These are actually some pretty sturdy structures, suggesting to us that T-Rex actually did use those arms.
And now the argument that Tyrannosaurus traded arms for heads over the ages, culminating in T-Rex, is being challenged by a startling new find. A more ancient, miniature, would-be T-Rex. The creature, though only about 10 feet long, has already started trading arms for head 60 million years before Tyrannosaurus Rex.
We have found the Tyrannosaur, the roots of the Tyrannosaur radiation, an animal that has all the features that we think are truly characteristic of Tyrannosaurs. The two-fingered hand, the enlarged brain, the enlarged jaw muscles, the long and lanky legs for running, the tiny arms. We're going to call it Raptor Rex.
The find is so new that Paul Serino has had time only to model Raptor Rex's head and neck. Not as fearsome as T-Rex's, perhaps, but clearly a ferocious profile. But it's the tiny arms that upset the apple cart. This was supposed to be a much later development.
Everywhere you looked, you found the features which we know characterized the later Tyrannosaurs in the late Cretaceous. They're no longer alone in having arms so small they couldn't reach the mouth or pick the nose.
In other words, if Tyrannosaur arms had started to disappear millions of generations before T-Rex, they should have been long gone by the time the Big Bang snuffed them out, traded in for even scarier heads. So why were the arms still there? Perhaps the man who named T-Rex back in 1905, Henry Fairfield Osborn, had it right all along. Those arms were not engineered for battle, but for love.
He saw the big snaggly teeth, and he said, this is for killing dinosaurs, and the long feet. And he said, this is for catching dinosaurs. And he saw the tiny arms, and he said, that part is for loving. That's the tickle part of T-Rex.
Tickling one's mate, especially a female tyrannosaur you'd rather not upset, makes perfectly good sense. Male anacondas today seem to have taken the same evolutionary tack. Just a tiny bit of the snake's hind leg remains, and its only apparent purpose is sexual tickling. For now, the riddle of T-Rex's freakishly small arms endures. One thing we do know, the predators were hardly alone in taking the evolutionary road to the bizarre. Back in the Jurassic, when 10-foot-long hunters were honing their killing ways, evolution was setting them up for a big surprise. The starting gun of a great arms race had sounded, and the prey animals were already eating their way to an outrageous success story of giant proportions. 150 million years before the explosive end to the age of the dinosaurs, the Earth was moving beneath the dinosaurs' feet, taking them for a ride, literally, into the lands of the outlandish. All the land on Earth was on just one continent, called Pangaea. But Pangaea started to break apart, a geological revolution that set the stage for an evolution revolution. The dawn of the dinosaurs, the Triassic, was about to give way to their middle period, the Jurassic, and bizarreness was about to be unleashed. As the continents were moving apart, climates were changing. Many dinosaur havens were becoming more isolated and more lush. And dinosaurs were now growing to mind-boggling sizes. The ancient evolutionary arms race, matching predators' weapons against prey's defenses, was escalating, with a new kind of eating machine taking the early lead. The time of giants had arrived. These were the sauropods.
They basically tell us how little we know about dinosaurs. If we were proportioned the same way, we'd have a head the size of a peanut and it'd be stuck out on the end of a 3-foot-long straw.
That neck that keeps on going and keeps on going, should stop, but keeps on going and going and going. That's bizarre.
One of evolution's strangest experiments in stretching the necks of sauropods is this one, the 70-foot, 16-ton Mamenchisaurus.
Its neck alone is longer than the rest of its body, basically.
When you look at the animal, it looks disproportionate. It looks like it's going to fall over because the neck is so long.
But an astoundingly long neck on a ridiculously smaller body conveys a huge advantage to an animal. You don't have to go anywhere to eat. Just stretch out that neck. And no predator, even one with a brain the size of a walnut, is going to take on such a titanic creature.
There's not a lot out there that can eat a sauropod when it's, 25 feet long. If you think about animals living in Africa today, animals that really don't get bothered too much are elephants, and they're huge, they're massive. They really only have to worry about getting eaten when they're small and when they're very old. And I think that sauropods probably adapted or adopted that kind of similar strategy in being big.
So how did the giant sauropods do it? Get so huge they could ignore predators? The answers lie deep in the fossilized bones of the dinosaurs, still etched with the marks of their life histories.
One of the ways that we can study dinosaur growth is by looking at thin sections of dinosaur bones so that light shines through those bones, and we can study them under a microscope and look for these specific markers. Things like growth rings, same kinds of things that are occurring in trees today.
What these growth rings tell Christy Curry Rogers is nothing short of astounding.
They grow between 2 and 56 times faster than all living reptiles.
You can only grow that much if you can eat that much. And the amount an animal would have to eat to fuel such growth is almost inconceivable. Some of the later sauropods would multiply the efficiency of their sweeping necks with something more: unbelievable mouths. And as Paul Serino found out in the deserts of Niger in Africa, by the Cretaceous, the need to feed led some voracious plant eaters to evolve some seriously strange heads. One simply blew his mind: the lawnmower, Nigersaurus.
I picked up the jaw of Nigersaurus and couldn't figure out how to attach it to the skull. It was so strange that it really took me quite a while to figure out that this dinosaur had a face like no other. Only its mother really, truly could love a dinosaur with a face like this.
Ugly or not, this face is pure genius in eating design. Nigersaurus's curious mouth, shaped like the flat attachment of a vacuum cleaner, relentlessly clipped and hoovered up food using a massive battery of small, sharp teeth.
There's no other animal that has all of its teeth at the end of the jaw. There's no other animal that's developed a tooth battery, hundreds of teeth coming out at the same time.
CT scans of the jaw bones showed up to 9 replacement teeth stacked behind each cutting tooth. When one wore out, another immediately took its place. Once the jaw was in place, Cerrito had a hunch the head and neck held more surprises.
The head orientation of Nigersaurus was just as bizarre as the feeding apparatus.
CT scans of the rest of Nigersaurus's perplexing head held the key to a lifestyle as unusual as the creature's anatomy.
Just nuts. I mean, all of its teeth are perched right up here in the front, and it really just is kind of crazy to figure out how even to make sense of this thing. What we did was to actually go in and try to put in the brain, which I just added in right here.
From the shape of the brain case, Larry Whitmer can model not only Nigersaurus's brain, but the delicate circular structures in the inner ear. These tell an animal when it is balanced properly. But when he tried to get that balance right, weird things happened.
The head, instead of being oriented horizontal, is actually oriented straight up and down, which doesn't even really make sense until we start to think about this thing with the rest of the animal.
Point Nigersaurus's head straight down, attach the neck the only way it fits, and what have you got? Something that clearly spent all of its time with its nose to the ground. A supersized, super elongated Mesozoic cow.
This neck for Nigersaurus, we think, was simply to swing the vacuum-like mouth around so it wouldn't have to walk. It really is a wonder. It is one of the most bizarre dinosaurs ever to have been discovered.
It tells us that these dinosaurs are not just, you know, icons for extinction. They're really evolutionarily successful, you know, innovative creatures.
Nigersaurus's grazing posture may mean most or all of the sauropods lived their lives horizontally, not vertically. Sauropods' necks may have been more than just a way to move insatiable mouths over giant swaths of vegetation. They may actually have been combat-worthy. If our long-necked friends, the giraffes, have anything to tell us.
A lot of people think that neck length in giraffes is being driven when there's only plant matter at the tips of the trees and the tallest giraffes are the only ones that therefore survive. Wrong. Neck length is driven by mate selection. And there's a ritual where they wrap their necks around each other and push. You apply that back to sauropods and you'd have to say, well, they certainly have plenty enough neck to do that. I'd say probably that's what they were doing.
But evolution wasn't just tinkering with the length and strength of sauropod necks. What exactly it was doing with this one is a bit of a puzzle. A Margosaurus, equipped with an elegant double row of spikes on its back, seems to have had a pair of fins. One set of spines would be strange enough, but the double row is truly baffling.
Paleontologists have been debating for years about what the function of those spikes might have been.
They're in the wrong place to use to fight off predators. Maybe they made the animals look much bigger than they really were, and just intimidated the creatures that were eyeing them hungrily. Or maybe they were for eyeing each other. Odd structures like these are leading scientists to a new way of thinking in paleontology. Evolution, it seems, has a strange way of taking plain, straightforward parts of the dinosaur with obvious functions and turning them into garish, baffling appendages whose purpose is the stuff of mystery and controversy. But as always with evolution, there's a method to the madness. Perhaps nowhere is the dinosaur's penchant for turning the straightforward into the fantastic more striking than when it comes to war, attacking others and defending themselves. Over the course of millions of years, intimidating weaponry sometimes morphed into something else altogether. Take, for example, those perennial favorites, the stegosaurs. Surely these creatures, with their giant plates and spiked tails, were built to stand and fight. What could be more obvious? Certainly, the stegosaurs bristled with fearsome-looking armory. Take Tujangasaurus, one of the earliest who took spikiness to wild extremes. A discovery from China, Tujangasaurus apparently went overboard with its defensive array. A fearsome row of pointy plates juts out from its back, leading down to a tail that would give any predator or competitor pause. 4 paired spikes, each 6 inches long, project from what was probably a flexible, whip-like tail. Tujangasaurus also sported intimidating 2-foot spikes, like bayonets, on its shoulders. But was this all really for battle? Recent research on other stegosaurs has made some scientists rethink the defense argument. Most problematic is the plates. They're in the wrong place.
You know, carnivorous dinosaurs probably weren't that smart, but they probably were smart enough to realize that if they bit the animal on the side, they wouldn't have to deal with the spikes.
And the spikes and plates alone may look intimidating, but they're not very strong in the armory department.
It just so happens that a few days ago, I found a plate of a stegosaur, a huge plate. It was massive. And when we started brushing towards the end of the plate, I was staggered at how thin it was. Fragile is an understatement.
The plates were also full of blood vessels, not the greatest defense strategy. Pitted against the jaws of the largest predators, they would have been snacks.
You know, if an Allosaurus bit into one of them, basically there'd be blood spurting everywhere.
Kind of like a big old cookie, this sort of blood-filled, good morsel to eat.
All of those blood vessels point to another possibility. The plates were used to regulate the animal's temperature. Arrayed to catch a breeze, they could cool the circulation. Pointed towards the sun, they would do the opposite. But many of the stegosaurs survived with tiny plates or no plates at all, which leads some paleontologists to believe that the stegosaur's mighty armory, perhaps even starting with Tujangasaurus, may have become more propaganda than pointy defenses. Some argue that almost anything you can point to as bizarre, things like Amargasaurus's neck, Spinosaurus's spectacular sail, and the wondrous heads of so many favorite dinosaurs, were all advertising. Advertising to predators that I'm bigger than you think. Advertising to rivals that I'm fitter than you. Advertising to potential mates that I've got the genes and health to maintain this riot of appendages. It's all about the display. And display, in the end, is all about sex.
Everything's for display. An animal does not have to defend itself every year, but it does have to mate every year. So display is the most important thing. Defense is secondary.
The present is the best way to study the past. And if you look at animals today, when you see, really bizarre things like some of the crests on birds, or elaborate horns on herbivorous animals, or frills on lizards and things like that, and you see, 99 times out of 100 that they are display structures.
But a quick survey of the dinosaur families shows that we've left something out. Those heads. So many of them were ominously horned, spiked, collared, crested, and domed. Surely these were meant for violence against predators and rivals, right? In the world of the bizarre dinosaurs, apparently nothing is as it seems. Sex. It's what it's all about. In the natural world, either you've got what it takes to find, fight for, and win over a mate, or you're Darwined out of the race. no more genes. By the time we've reached the Cretaceous, especially as the dinosaurs' doom descended at the very end, evolution had designed some of the most flamboyant and creative sexual displays and behaviors the world has ever seen. And the key to success was often using your head. When it comes to perplexing headgear, nothing could top the ceratopsians, bearing some of the most fearsome heads to grace the prehistoric world. These certainly look like weapons and armory, sharp spears sticking out of broad shields. Take, for example, our old favorite, triple-horned and elegantly collared Triceratops, often depicted fending off a voracious T-Rex. For Jack Horner, this is not a terribly convincing scenario.
From a logical point of view, the last place in this world you want your defense mechanism is on your head. I mean, about the time you poke a hole in a T-Rex and he falls down, he's going to land on top of your head.
So what about another obvious solution? That they were fighting each other. That all of this headgear was mostly about testosterone-drenched males pounding the living daylights out of each other in the fight for mating rights. Certainly, among some amorous mammals today, head-on violence seems to be a prerequisite for reproductive success. Even among the reptiles today, there are a handful of headbutters. And one of them, the Jackson's chameleon, looks startlingly like its ancient distant cousin.
Here's your Triceratops analogy. I mean, look at it, 3 horns. Unbelievable. Even has what they call a casque. This is very much like the frill on the back of a horned dinosaur such as Triceratops. And there's some evidence of injuries on the frills of Triceratops that suggests that they did fight with one another.
But chameleons would rather display their horns than lock them. And Greg Erickson thinks the ceratopsians would have done the same.
What were these structures for? Well, the traditional explanation is that this shield was a defense to parry off blows from other horned dinosaurs or to help and protect their neck when they were being attacked by predatory dinosaurs. And I'm not sure I believe any of that. I think these are display structures for the most part.
From humble origins in the Jurassic, the ceratopsians' heads simply exploded into exuberant spectacles in their last days. There's our favorite, Triceratops, along with its even more outlandish cousins. There's Styracosaurus, meaning spiked lizard, with its profusion of long horns extending from its neck frill. Here's elegant Chasmosaurus, with an even taller, more elegant frill, this one edged with lacy little spikes. And the equally curious head of Centrosaurus. For many paleontologists today, these extreme heads are a clear indication that the ceratopsians were lovers, not fighters. Potential mates could recognize their own kind at a distance, size up their frills, and get to the heart of the matter. To heighten the allure, the heads may have blazed with colors as extravagant as their sizes and shapes. In one dinosaur family, the question of how best to use your head to win the girl has reached its own level of weirdness, one in which headbutting among paleontologists is getting fiercer than any headbanging in the Mesozoic. Welcome to the world of the pachycephalosaurs, or thick-headed lizards. If any animal on Earth looks more suited to slamming its cranium into another's, it has got to be some of these guys. Some of their domes are 8 inches thick or more, inspiring awe and controversy in equal measure.
Of all the major dinosaur groups, the buttheads are the ones that inspire the deepest soul searching among us, the most puzzled expressions, and the most extraordinary, exhilarating flights of idiocy.
We're in a struggle to understand dome-headed dinosaurs.
Adult Pachycephalosaur domes are definitely not adapted for headbutting. Definitely not.
On one point, everyone agrees. The heads of the Pachycephalosaurs were sexy, at least to other Pachys. The argument is over whether they were sexy in the violent sense, impressing the females with power, or pure visual allure. There's no doubt that the skull of this dome head, Pachycephalosaurus, bears a striking resemblance to the most dedicated headbutters of today.
This is the butthead supreme alive today. The muskox. Side view, big googly eyes, dome here. Please note it is domed. 67 million years ago, this rammed. Right now in the Arctic tundra, this rams.
But for Jack Horner, even if a head looks on the outside, like it was used for butting, you have to look inside to see if it was up to the job. He has been cutting open the heads of Pachycephalosaurs for years now. What he has found was counterintuitive. Their heads were full of brittle stuff.
They're constructed of a very odd kind of bone. It is brittle. It's kind of like porcelain. And if those dinosaurs had crashed their heads together, they probably would have just shattered. The Pachys did not headbutt and couldn't have more than once. Once they crashed their heads together, that would have knocked them both out, and they'd have just been laying there.
For Jack Horner, then, the Pachycephalosaur heads were all about the same old love song, a pure display of health and vitality, with no need for all of that violence. Not everyone is convinced. Earlier studies indicate the bones were pretty sturdy and awfully biologically expensive for just showing off.
6, 7, 8 inches of solid bone in some of these large Pachycephalosaur dinosaurs. That's a lot of bone to feed, a lot of bone to upkeep.
And even if headbanging may have taken its toll, it would have been worth it.
If you're going to headbutt to impress a potential mate, you're going to run the risk of breaking your head. It does happen today with muskox, and it's a risk you've got to take, because that's the only way to get your genes into the next generation.
Bob Bacher points out two other factors, like the muskox. Pachycephalosaurs have huge areas on the back of the neck where massive muscles could have been attached. And then there's that equally classic dinosaur brain.
Though I love these animals, they were dumb as posts. Brain is very small. Small brains are harder to injure.
The headbutting, among both dinosaurs and paleontologists, reaches its culmination with one of the most bizarre dinosaurs of all. Enter the dragon, Dracorex hogwartsia.
What makes Dracorex hogwartsia so wonderful is it does look like something out of a fantasy movie. It really does look like a dragon with this strange spiky skull. It doesn't look real.
If ever there was a face made for headbutting, as far as Bob Bacher's concerned, it's this one. It bears a remarkable resemblance to the head-banging African warthog. And by mashing two casts of Dracorex's peculiar face together, he discovered something amazing.
This is craniological Velcro. There's so many bumps that you press the heads together and they don't slip. So they push and shove and push and shove and push and shove until one of them gives up.
Even here, opinions differ. Horner suspects that Dracorex wasn't even its own species, let alone a headbutter. Just an adolescent Pachycephalosaur, obviously going through an awkward phase. Clearly, the Dragon King of Hogwartsia is not going to put the headbutting controversy to rest. And now, An even more puzzling little dinosaur has charged into the debate. A dome-headed mini pachycephalosaur, about the size of a cat.
We have found an absolutely bizarre head butter that we believe is a dwarf. A little animal we're going to call mushroom head, mycocephaly, because it almost looks like it's wearing a top hat that's expanded, yet it's filled with solid bone, covered with an armored surface that also is smooth at the top.
A head butter this small? Surely it was just a baby packy. Except the CT scans told a different story. The sutures between the bones in its skull had completely fused, which means the animal was a full-grown adult.
I think this is our smallest head butter ever to have evolved.
From the violent to the most peaceful way to use your head, here is a creature that may have perfected that gentlest of seductions. The love song. The curiously crested head of Parasaurolophus kept paleontologists guessing for generations.
Parasaurolophus is just truly weird. It's got this enormous expansion of skull bones, which projects into this banana-like lump coming out of the back of its skull.
For a long time, it was assumed that this dinosaur was a water dweller and used its unusual headgear as a snorkel. But CT scans of the crest showed that there was no opening at the top to breathe through. What those CT scans did show was this: an elegant construction of tubes that bears a striking resemblance to a trombone. Using the CT scans to generate a 3D virtual instrument, scientists in New Mexico may have even recreated Parasaurolophus's eerie music. In fact, its crest might have done double duty when it came to flirting, displaying both audibly and visually for the opposite sex. Though the arguments about exactly how dinosaurs used their heads just keep heating up, one thing is for sure: sex in the late Cretaceous was a roaring success. But the wild triumphs of the age of the dinosaurs were about to be rendered moot. Their only hopes rested with an evolutionary experiment that would result in some of the most baffling creatures ever. After more than 150 million years dominating the Earth, the dinosaurs were doomed. There was an asteroid on the way. Volcanoes were about to explode. Perhaps even a deadly plague was being unleashed. But evolution had nonetheless stumbled onto a plan for the dinosaurs' survival: the bird plan. And nature's experiments with the bird cousins were simply wild. Take this little bird-like dinosaur, Epidendrosaurus. Standing on two legs, with forearms and claws elongating into wing-like proportions, and possibly sporting feathers, sparrow-sized Epidendrosaurus couldn't fly. But it probably did live in trees, where its outrageous hands came in, well, handy. They are completely out of proportion to its body, and that one finger is twice as long as the others.
I mean, it's sort of similar to what you see in this type of lemur called an eye in Madagascar, where that really elongate finger may have been used to, to dig into the bark of trees after termites or some other insects that they were eating. That's also a very, very strange thing.
More than a decade ago, Mark Norell discovered some of the first direct evidence of bird-like behavior among the dinosaurs.
12 eggs. All right.
Fossilized dinos who had been sitting on their fossilized eggs. These were the oviraptors. Most oviraptors looked like birds and stuck to bird-like sizes, the largest being smaller than an ostrich. That is, until this behemoth was discovered. Gigantoraptor. More than 16 feet tall and weighing in at 1.5 tons.
This was absolutely enormous. This was a big animal. It's almost on the scale of Tyrannosaurus rex. But think scaling a giant chicken. This is what this animal almost looked like.
This enormous dinosaur has a toothless beak, which would suggest that it ate plants. But its size and fearsome claws hint that it may have been a meat eater as well. But perhaps the most mysterious bird-like dinosaur of all is this one, Deinocheirus. Known only from a single set of tremendous arms and claws, the animal may have been 40 feet long. Originally imagined to be a deadly carnivore, tearing its prey to shreds with those incredible claws, Deinocheirus may actually have been a gentle giant. Some paleontologists think that it may have behaved more like that most placid of animals, the sloth. But until some more of its intriguing fossils are found, Deinocheirus is largely a creature of the imagination. Deinocheirus lived at the end of the Cretaceous period and may well have been around to witness the cataclysmic end to the age of the dinosaurs. Its line did not survive. But some little dino birds did, and no one knows why. It is one of the greatest mysteries in the dinosaurs' riddle-filled story. All we do know is that the basic body plan, the bird plan, somehow made it through to the modern age. And the birds of today are now the bizarre dinosaurs of the world. Far more successful than either mammals or reptiles, the birds have managed to find ways to thrive in virtually every habitat on Earth. And nothing can match them in terms of outrageous behavior and spectacular displays of strength and sexiness. They're a credit to their extraordinary predecessors, ancient cousins who seem to take every opportunity to stretch the bounds of nature's creativity.
They evolve horns, frills, spikes, plates, long necks, long tails, sharp claws, big teeth. They do all of these things, and they're wildly successful organisms on the planet from 228 million years ago to 65 million years ago. They're the kings and queens of the Earth at that time.
And the truly remarkable part? We've probably only discovered a tiny fraction of all the dinosaurs that ever existed. Meaning that even more mind-boggling and mystifying creatures are out there, just waiting to be found.
This amazing amount of material we find, some of it's going to be some very unusual animals. So it was probably a lot weirder in the past than we can even imagine.
That's the fun part of paleontology, because you can be assured of this, that we're going to find some new and bizarre dinosaurs in the future.
There are plenty of surprises out there. So many things that you can't predict. All I can say is, be ready for anything.